Section 8.3, we're going to continue our discussion on properties of exponents. In this particular section, we're going to be focused on defining and using zero and negative exponents. Okay, so again, we're going to, all of the rules that we've already talked about, the product properties, the quotient properties, are still going to be in full effect. Okay, now here are the two new properties today. The definition of zero: anything raised to the zero power always equals 1. As long as a is not 0. If a were 0, well then obviously it would just be 0. Okay? So any number raised to the 0 power is 1, as long as that thing is not 0. Okay? And as far as negative exponents are concerned, the way that you get rid of a negative exponent is you just take it from the top and put it on the bottom, or take it from the bottom and put it on the top. Okay? In other words, this a to the negative 1 really you could think of as a to the negative n over 1. So if you want to get rid of the negative exponent, take this and put it on the bottom. Okay? So then it's just 1 over a to the n. So if you have a negative exponent, simply move it to the opposite spot. Move it to the top or move it to the bottom, and then the negative goes away. So if we evaluate the expressions without using a calculator, this first one, okay, you can't do 2 to the negative 3. Okay, so what you got to do is you got to get rid of the negative. How do I get rid of the negative? I put it on the bottom. Now the negative goes away, and now I can evaluate because I know what 2 to the third power is. 2 to the third power is 8. Okay, so 2 to the negative third is the same thing as just saying 1/8. Okay, part B, this is the nice thing about the zero property. It's simple. Anything raised to the 0 is just 1. I'm done. That's it. No work to be shown. Okay, in C, you can do this one however you want. The way I would do it is we're dividing inside the parentheses, so take the exponent to both guys. So you get 1 to the negative third over 4 to the negative third. Well, I want to get rid of both negatives, so I'm going to take this guy, move it to the bottom, and take this one and move it to the top, and that'll get rid of my negatives for me. So on top you have 4 to the positive 3. On bottom you have 1 to the third, but again 1 to the third, that's 1 times 1, which is 1, times 1 again, which is just 1, so we don't even have to worry about it. So now you have 4 to the third. Remember, that's 4 times 4 times 4. Okay, well that right there is 16, and 16 times 4 is 64. Alright, and then finally, if you look at D, it says 0 to the negative 7. So to get rid of the negative, I got to move it to the bottom. So it's 1 over 0 to the 7th. Well, 0 to the 7th is just 0. And anything divided by 0 is undefined. Okay? Undefined. 0 to the negative 7 is undefined. Okay, in example 2, again, we're going to combine all of these properties now. Okay, there are a lot of examples. I think there's what, eight examples here. I'm probably going to do the first, I'll probably do the first 4 with you, and then I'm going to leave the last 4 there for you to do on your own. Okay, to kind of see where you're at. So again, I look at part A. You can do this a few different ways. You can go ahead and say, well, I'm multiplying. I have the same base. I'm multiplying, so that means I can now combine these two exponents by adding. Okay, and so you say this is negative 5 to the 4 plus negative 4. Well, that's negative 5 to the 0, and anything to the 0 is just 1. Okay. Another way of doing the same problem, okay, let me erase this now. Another way of doing the same exact problem is to look at your properties in a different order. Okay, what I mean by that is this. Some of you might say, well, look, I got to get rid of this negative first. Okay, and so you'll say, okay, so I have negative 5 to the 4th times, now in order to get rid of the negative, I have to move it to the bottom. So this is what you end up with. Well, this guy's actually over 1. And so now when you multiply, remember when you multiply fractions, you're just going straight across. Multiply your tops, multiply your bottoms. So on top you have negative 5 to the 4th power. On bottom you have negative 5 to the 4th power. Anything divided by itself is always 1. Okay. If you didn't recognize that, then maybe you said, oh no, I got to use this property. I'm dividing. Since I'm dividing, I have to subtract my exponents. That's negative 5 to the 4 minus 4, which is negative 5 to the 0. Anything to the 0 is 1. Any three ways I just explained are going to get you the same exact spot. There's not a right or wrong way of doing it. Just find what works for you, okay? And however you decide, however you see it, will work as long as your math is correct throughout the entire problem. Okay. All right, part B. Again, the way I would treat this problem is I would say I have a power to a power, and so I'm going to go ahead and take care of that first. So I have -2 times -2, which is +4. 5 to the 4th, well, that's 5 times 5 times 5 times 5. All right, so this is going to be a little bit bigger number than we maybe want. 5 times 5 is 25, times 5 is 125, times 5 more should be 625. Okay, and again, that's not the only way to do it, but it's definitely one of the ways of doing it. In part C, okay, I got to get rid of the negative, so I got to move it to the top. So I have 4 to the second over 1. I'm not going to worry about the 1. 4 squared is obviously just 16. Okay, and then in part D here, and then again, this is the last one I'm going to do here in this section. You guys can do the last 4 there on your own. So in part D, there's a couple different ways. Maybe you look at it and say, I got to get this guy to the top. And so what you do is you do 3 squared times 3 to the 1. Whoops. Okay, and then at that point you're multiplying, so you'd have to add your exponents, so you get 3 to the 3rd. Okay? Or someone else might say, well, 3 to the 3rd is obviously going to be 27. Someone else might say, well, wait a second, no, we're dividing here. If I'm dividing, then the way I combine my exponents is by subtracting. So I do 3 to the second minus -1, right? Subtract your exponents. Well, 2 minus -1 is really the same thing as plus plus, so it's 3 to the 3rd, and we just said that that was 27. So again, you could have used the quotient property, or you could have just used the product of a negative exponent and then use the product property. So there's more than one way to do all these problems, so don't think that you got to get stuck in one way of doing it. Okay, example 3, and this is the last example we're going to look at, says simplify each expression. Write your answer using only positive exponents. Okay, so at this point, if you feel comfortable, I would pause the video and just try them on your own and see where you get, and then use the video to check your answers. Okay, but in part A here, let's see here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the top. So I'm going to have 2w to the -3x over. Now I'm going to take this 2 to everything inside. I'm allowed to do that because we're multiplying. So what I have on bottom now is I have 2 squared, w squared, x squared. Okay, and for the purposes of our video, I'm going to go ahead and erase this 2 squared because we all know what that is. 2 squared is just 4. And now I can simplify. Okay, what I'm going to do, the way I see it, is I say, okay, we're dividing, so I got to subtract all of my exponents. First of all, I'm going to take this 2 over 4, and I'm going to make that 1 over 2. Okay? And then when you decide to subtract, all of your variables will stay on top for right now. So you have w, okay, and then you have -3 and 2. So you got to do -3, you always do the top one, whoops, minus the bottom one. And then you have your x. The top exponent is 1, the bottom one is 2. And so now what you have here is you have 1 over 2, and then on top you have w to the -5, x to the -1. And again, it clearly says in the directions you cannot have negative exponents, and so your final answer should be 1 over 2. This guy's got to go to the bottom to become positive, and so does this. That would be your final answer. 1 over 2w to the 5th x. And that's the way you would leave your answer. Can't simplify anymore. Okay. In part B, again, the first thing I see is I see 6 over 2. I know that makes 3 on top. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and just use my quotient properties. The exponent here is 1, the exponent there is 1, so I have f to the 1 minus 1, and then I have g to the -4 minus 1. This is just combining things that we've talked about the previous videos here. So I have 3f to the 0, g to the -5. Okay, now here's today's video, right? So I have 3, f to the 0, that's just 1. So that guy, for our purposes, just goes away because we're going to multiply by 1, and that just leaves 3. And then the g to the -5, I got to make that a positive exponent, so that guy's got to go to the bottom of the fraction. So 3 over g to the 5th would be your answer there in part B. And then let me give myself some room here. I'm going to go ahead and erase everything. All right, and then finally, the last example in the notes here is I'm going to go ahead and take this negative 2 to every guy inside. And so what you have is you have 3 to the negative 2, y to the negative 2, z to the negative 4. Obviously, they're all negative, which means they all got to go to the bottom. Okay, so when I take them all to the bottom, they all become positive. 3 to the second, y to the second, z to the fourth. And then the final step here is obviously I know what this is, so I should evaluate that. So I have 1 over 9 y squared, z to the fourth. And that would be your final expression. So again, hopefully this is a nice video as far as kind of tying all of the properties of exponents that we've discussed into one lesson. As always, if there are questions, have them ready in class, and we'll make sure we get them answered.